Folks. So literally, it is I have to figure out how to use this. It is the biggest question that we get at social-engineer.org, right? So we write a newsletter, if you haven't heard, and a podcast that we do every month. And people can come to the site and talk to us about social engineering. It's like a free resource. We have the framework on there. And we get a lot of people that ask us questions. And the biggest one is, how can I become a social engineer? That literally is the biggest question we get. Because it sounds sexy, right? A couple months ago, I was in Jamaica, and I got to break into 2 banks. Next week, I'm flying to an armed facility to break into an armed facility. That sounds cool, doesn't it? Sounds cool to me. As long as I don't get shot, it sounds really cool. You know, when we were at the bank, there was a guy there that was asked to watch us when we were doing our PCI test, and he had to leave. So he got a guy who was maybe 6'7". And I don't know why he needed this, but he had a shotgun on each leg, and he was fully armored, and then he had a stick that he could pull out. And I went to go touch a computer, and he just went, I'm cool with that. Failure's an option at this point. I'm okay. You know, I'm perfectly okay with that. But it sounds like a great job, right? So people hear this stuff. We get to fish. I've sent 13 million phishing emails in my career. We did 1,500 hours of fishing last year as a company. So it sounds really awesome and exciting. So we get a lot asked this question. Can anyone guess what the second most question is that we get on the website?
Can I come work for you?
No, that goes along with the first. That's close though.
My spouse's account?
Oh, he is almost the winner. It's how I hack Facebook. That's written exactly that way. How I hack Facebook. That's the second. Can anyone guess the third?
Twitter.
No. It's why is Dave not on the podcast? That's actually the third. That's actually the third most. So in ranking, these are the top 3 questions that we get. So when this started happening, I started writing things about it. So I wrote 2 newsletters, and I thought this would be a great answer. So what I did is I went and I interviewed people who hire social engineers. So not only myself, but I interviewed Dave Kennedy because he hires SEs. I interviewed Ping Look. She used to work at Optiv, which was Accuvant at the time when I did an interview with her. And they interviewed social engineers and hired them. So I said, what do you look for when you're hiring people to be a social engineer as a career? And I took their information, and I have a 2-part newsletter, which is still up there, 61 and 62. And it talks about how to become a social engineer in this industry, things that you would want. Yet that didn't seem to satiate the thirst and hunger for this question. Okay, so we went and we did a podcast where I actually took everyone that worked for me at the time, and we interviewed them about what skills they felt were necessary to become a professional in this industry. And then I put that out there thinking that's going to help, and it didn't stop. So now we have this talk. Okay, so I'm hoping that this can help, because here's why I think that this may be important. What we're going to talk about are, when I'm interviewing for this position, what am I looking for in a person? What is it that attracts me to an individual that I want to interview and hire? Okay, and I'm going to tell you some things that I hope is not going to make me a target for all of you after this, because we are at a conference for social engineers. So I'm just hoping that doesn't do it. So what leet skillsors do you need? Because you have to say it that way if you want to work in this industry. You have to use leet speak. You can't use English. So what skills do you need if you want to work in the industry, if you want to be this? Do you think you need a psychology degree? No. You don't need I don't have I don't have a degree. Oop, your poor microphone. I just tapped it like this. I'm still doing it. I'm sorry. I'm going to stop doing it. The microphone's for the recording, and I just realized that they now have a heartbeat on the recording. Sorry, Patrick. Not helpful at all. Not helpful at all. I don't have a degree. As a matter of fact, embarrassingly enough, I got kicked out of college for writing a war dialer and shutting down 60% of a county's phone line before it was illegal, because it wasn't illegal back in the early 90s. I didn't do it. I wasn't malicious. Guess this. I was in getting a degree in Lotus programming, because that is the future, right? That was my degree. And I was writing that we just got the internet in the school, and I daisy chained these 2 4800 baud modems together because blazing speed. And then I wrote this Lotus program that dialed the number, and it played a few digits, because back then phone freaking was a big thing. Captain Crunch was a big deal before he turned into a pedo and all that. And we would play the digits into the phone, and it would tell the phone, hey, why don't you stop working for like 60 seconds? And then it would hang the phone up and dial another number and do the same thing. And I thought, this is going to be fun, right? Little prank calls. But then I threaded it. So it was doing like 3 dozen calls at once over the modems and then hanging up and doing it again. And I didn't realize that when you hit go, it went, and the whole county went down. So a couple of days later, the cops came to the college and they said, hey, who did this? And I'm like, hey, that was me. Like, not a great SE, right, at the time. And they're like, yeah, that was bad, son. Slap on the wrist because there's nothing. And the university director came and said, yeah, that was embarrassing. So have fun in auto mechanics. And I didn't continue. So a psychology degree is not necessary. Yet I do believe that understanding human psychology is important. Okay, I do believe that is important as far as the job. You don't need ninja skills. I am not jumping fences or scaling walls with this body. It is not happening. I could try, but it doesn't look too good. So you don't need ninja skills. Obviously, you don't need good looks. Okay, you don't need good looks for this industry. Technical skills. Now, let me clarify. I think having technical skills is important, but they're not necessary. Okay, I got asked once by a young woman who did not know much about like VPN. She goes, can I really be a social? Yes, 100%. You can. As long as you have people to support you. A good team is valuable in that. You don't need to have every technical skill. When you think about social engineering penetration testing, we're not testing your network. I'm testing your people. So I don't need to understand your network to do that. Is it an added bonus? Yes, but it's not a necessity. Okay, and look good in a cat suit. That definitely is not needed. Okay, definitely not needed. What things do you need? Well, here's some things we're going to talk about as skills that I look for when I'm interviewing people. And these are lack of fear and willingness to try, critical thinking, a huge one. We'll talk about that extensively, knowledge, empathy, and then the best of all, everyone looks forward to this, report writing. Right? No, not true, but it's really important, and we'll talk about why. Okay, so let's talk about first the first one, and I just got to bring up a warning. These skills are only if you want to be a professional. So if you want to go out and hack people just because it's fun, or it's pranks, or you're malicious, then everything I'm going to talk about is not applicable to you. Okay, this is if you want it as a job, a career. You want to actually help people. So if you want to help people in security, then the things I'm going to talk about work. If you're looking for it from the other side, then you need a whole different set of skills, and that's not this talk. That may not be a talk I ever give, to be honest, but we can do it in LobbyCon. Lack of fear. Okay, now why is lack of fear important? Yeah, this guy is a rebel, right? Well, what did we just say? I told you a couple stories. Like we're gonna be breaking into an armed facility next week. Me, myself, and 2 of my employees. You have to kind of have a little bit of lack of fear if you're going to do that. Now, the lack of fear, don't mistake lack of fear with carelessness and stupidity. That is not what I'm talking about. So we're not going to go running into an armed facility with backpacks on, yelling all sorts of things. That's not going to happen. We're going to try to SE our way in smoothly. And I will tell you this, if someone says freeze, guess what I'm going to do? Freeze! And we've already had this conversation with my employees. If someone yells freeze, we will slowly go to our knees and put our hands behind our heads. That's the protocol. In an armed facility, I'm not pushing it. Right? I'm not pushing it in an armed facility. So lack of fear doesn't mean taking risk that's beyond safe and health precautions and not being smart. Lack of fear means I'm going to say to you, hey, I need you to call this person to fish information out of them, and you're going to get their social security number, their date of birth, and their password, their computer. And how many of you have experience in phishing? Okay, so less than, I would say, maybe 10% or 20% in the room. And for those of you that rose your hand, does it still cause fear for you? Yeah, right? Every time. Every time. I've been doing this for 8 years, and I told you we did 1,150 hours of phishing last year, and I get nervous every time I pick up the phone. Right? And it doesn't go away. It gets better to manage. I mean, it's not stopping fear, but you have to have that fear and then say, I'm willing to bypass that fear and try this thing. Yes?
What are you afraid of?
This is an interesting point. I have this conversation with a couple of my employees who the fear actually stops them from progress. It stops them from doing it. And I always ask that because you can't get caught. And if you do, we're spoofing numbers. I don't know who we are. I'm Paul in IT, so it doesn't really matter. It's the fear of I'm on the phone with another person, and I know that what I'm doing is devious, it's false, And I'll give you an example to tell you why this has a psychological effect. I was on the phone with a guy. We were doing a pen test. I called him and I said, I was Paul from IT, and soon as I said I had a whole spiel, he stopped me. He goes, "Thank God, I've been emailing you guys for 3 months. I can't get my printer to print." And I went, "Oh, tell me what the problem is." He told me it was a driver issue. I helped him fix it. I literally helped him do tech support on the phone, right? And I'm thinking, this is a great way to build rapport. So I said, "Why don't you print a test page?" He's like, "You're the best IT guy we have. You didn't have to come to my office. This is amazing." And I'm like, "No problem, sir." And then I'm like, "Oh, SE, click." And I'm like, "So I need some help, you know?" And then I went through my whole spiel. Well, while no joke, I'm logging into his accounts with his password that he gave me over the phone. He is telling me that his daughter has her engagement party, and she works at the company too, and they're having a company-wide engagement party, and he invited me to his daughter's engagement party. I mean, talk about guilt, right? I'm like sitting there, and I'm like, "And what's your password?" You know? Thank you for inviting. No, I'm not crying. You're crying. You know? And I'm like hacking this poor guy, and he's inviting me to his daughter's engagement party because I'm the best IT guy on the planet. You have to be able to go, okay, whew, that felt really bad. That felt really bad psychologically, but he didn't get fired. We didn't embarrass him. There was no punishment. Education. Education is the resultant of our tests. So it's like going to a doctor, and the doctor's got to jab you with needles. He puts the glove on. He's sticking fingers in places. I'm sure he's not enjoying it, right? But at the end, what's his purpose? It's to save you. It's to hopefully find any problems that can then be fixed. That's what I have to think about my job. It may not be enjoyable all the time, or may not feel good, but I got to do it because I'm trying to help.
7% of the population is sociopathic. Why not hire them?
That's a great question, and because sociopaths, the question was, why not hire sociopaths? They don't feel empathy. They lack empathy, and to do this job professionally, one of the skills I look for is empathetic response. I need to be able to hack you, but realize that my job in doing so is not to humiliate you. There is a difference in hacking you and making you feel better for having met me, and humiliating you in fear and embarrassment. I don't ever employ fear and embarrassment.
Can you teach that?
Yes. I think I have a few students in the classroom. Have we taught it? Guys, right? We've taught it. You know, this is a basis of my company. We don't use negative pretexts in social engineering because I ruin the teachable moment. So if you stand up here, and this is not an SE course, this is a martial arts course, and I say, "Hey, you want to learn how to fight?" And you go, "Yeah," and I go, "Flap," and I punch you in the face. And now I'm like, "Now I want you to accept me as your instructor." You're like, "Dude, you just brought me up in front of a bunch of people and punched me in the face, and then I pant you, and everyone's laughing at you, right?" Do you feel like, "Hey, he's my buddy, I want him to be my instructor"? No. Because I just punched you, then I humiliated you. So if I do that with the SE world, right, where I fish you and then I laugh at you, or I humiliate you, I embarrass you, and then I expect you to want me to be your instructor, it doesn't work. So my goal is to make you feel better for having met me. And if I can do that, now after I hack you, you're willing to be educated by me too. So it's harder work. I'll tell you this much, guys. It's harder work to be this kind of an SE because it's much easier to use feet. It's much easier for me to pants you than it is for me to keep your pants on and have you learn. That sounded... Can we edit that? I'm not sure if that... tweetable moments. Moving on. And please, everyone keep your pants on. Okay. Yes, the eternal bond. Critical thinking. Now, yes, don't ever give your gun to a monkey. Okay, I'm just serious about this. This is very important. Why is critical thinking so important? Now, let me define, because critical thinking has multiple definitions. So in the yeah, that's a good one, isn't it? Come on. In the world, critical thinking is often applied to scientific theory, and critical thinking, when applied to science, often is talked about in the way that we question everything. We question every belief, and that's not what I'm speaking about when I talk about critical thinking. When I talk about critical thinking from a social engineering angle, I'm talking about the ability to look at a problem. So you hire me to fish your people, and I need to spearfish these 10 executives. But that's a lot of data, right? OSINT could be unbelievable. Well, how do I critically think looking at the OSINT when I'm given X amount of hours? So I'm told I have 5 hours per target to do OSINT. So I don't have endless amounts of time, right? There's a contract to this, because we're talking about professional SE. So in 5 hours, how can I maximize my ability to find the perfect OSINT that will allow me to be successful in my attack vector? Critical thinking will mean that I can't get stuck in a rabbit hole. So I go down this guy's rabbit hole, and I'm finding that he's, got a billion pictures on Facebook, but they don't lead anywhere. None of them are useful to me as a social engineer. To ignore it, move on, and go to a different vector. But to not lose that data in case I have to correlate it later on. So now I find something on Twitter, and I'm like, ooh, someone on Twitter said happy birthday, and it was July 17th, July 16th. Let me go, or June 16th. Let me go back to his Facebook account on June 16th and actually see if there's any birthday messages or cards, and now I know what year he was born, how old he was, being able to correlate that data. That's critical thinking when I talk about that. A lot of people don't have that. Now, why? Is because they don't teach it in universities. They teach book knowledge. So think about most of our certifications that we have in this industry. They're Q&A. I'm not cutting them, okay? So don't take it this way. Like, if you have the CISSP, credit to you. I mean, that's a hard dang cert. But it's Q&A. So if you get that, and you come to me, I don't know if you have the skill to do it. I know you have the book knowledge. So what I don't want is book knowledge people. What I want is people being able to actually do it. Critical thinking proves to me that you can do that. So it's a really hard skill to gauge. It's almost impossible skill to teach unless you self-teach it. So if you self-teach it, that's great. And self-teaching means regulating yourself. When you get stuck in a rabbit hole going, hey, I need to stop, back up. And this is not the price for this talk, but I talk a lot about amygdala hijacking. We get ourselves emotional. It creates a situation where we don't use logic centers when we're making decisions. So you need to take a 30-second break, 3-minute break, whatever, and say, okay, let me rethink this and how I can apply these things. So critical thinking is a very important part if you want to be a professional social engineer. Knowledge, okay? Now, this is where some knowledge comes in that's really important. OSINT. If you don't even know what OSINT is, then you're going to have a real hard time in this industry, right? So open source intelligence. We need to understand what it is and how to actually do it. How to find things on people more than going to Google and typing in Chris Hadnagy. Yeah, you're going to find some things, but are you going to be able to find targeted things? So you need to understand that. So this is some knowledge that you need to have. Understanding the newest vectors, and this takes time on your part, right? Because how many times have you, I'm not cutting anyone, so don't take it this way, and I don't know what other speakers have said, so if someone said this, I'm not being argumentative, but like PDF exploits, they don't exist anymore, right? Yeah, I still hear people talking about them. I mean, Adobe's kind of fixed it. So if you want to exploit things, what do we use nowadays? PowerShell, Python, right? You can do that, but you can use a URI that looks like a PDF, has the same icon, and it goes to a link. But back in the day when you can put shell code into a PDF and they launch it and you're getting shell, those days are gone. So you need to not be stuck in 5 years ago and understand what are the vectors today. What fish are being used effectively? What's a BEC scam? What's vishing, and what's the hottest vector in vishing? We need to understand that if you want to be an SE, because when your clients come and they say, hey, what do you think we should do? You can't go, well, I don't know, what do you think? You have to give them some suggestions and ideas. Here's how we should progress, okay? And again, this comes back to the technical portion. For me, when I started Social Engineer LLC, I was an exploit writer with OffSec, right? I wasn't skilled. I was working with Matty, and he was the skilled one, and I was like his lackey doing, the shell code with a calculator. No kidding. But I really enjoyed that. But when I started this company, I said, okay, I can't be great at both. I can be great at one, but I can't be great at both. So I stopped really focusing on technical network exploitation. And that meant I could focus on human exploitation. So that meant now, if something comes up in a pen test and we need shell, guess what? It's not going to be me. I need someone on my team who can do it. So I need to have a team member or a friend or somebody I can partner with to say, hey, can you work up a Word doc with a PowerShell exploit in it for me? That does this, that goes to this, and I have a team that does that now. So it still makes us great, but it's not all me. I don't need to always have it be all about me. Empathy. So this comes back to your question, sir. Why is empathy so important? Because what's the end goal of being a professional social engineer? See, this I can go on a rant for a little bit, but I'm not gonna. But a long time ago, my company was about making sure I always had the 100% rule, which meant I always succeeded. And what that means is that if you start to win as my client, my ego is going to take over, and I'm going to start to use any possible techniques I can employ to ensure that I win. And that means that I don't care about your feelings. And that's not a really great partner, is it? Would you want that in a physical partner? In a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, someone who only cares about their needs? You wouldn't, right? That doesn't sound like a great partner. So when you're hiring a security partner, do you want someone who is just about me? As long as I look cool, then I don't really care, just keep paying me. No, I had to restructure the company to say we need to have empathy because I'm not the bad guys. Yeah, the bad guys don't care about your grandma, your grandpa, your life savings. They don't care. We had a woman that lived in our town that we had a neighbor tell us that she fell for the grandma scam, right? Hey, grandma, I'm partying in Mexico with my buddies. I got arrested. Can I have some money for bail? She was getting cancer treatment, no insurance. She spent her last money sending them the bail money. Right? She died. She died. This is not made up. There's a guy in New York City who committed suicide because he got ransomware that said the FBI was coming to his house because they found child porn in his computer. And he killed himself and his 3-year-old son. So he wouldn't go to jail because he was a single dad. So these are serious things. So when you lack empathy, that stuff doesn't bother you. I will never employ that, and no one that works for me will employ that, and if they try, they will no longer work for me. That's important to me, because I need my clients to feel like you can trust us, and you can trust us. Now, that doesn't mean I won't tell you, right? If I see a giant vulnerability, here's a great example of that. We did what we call a SIRA. It stands for Social Engineering Risk Assessment. So CEO hires us to OSINT and dox his life, and then to write a spearfish. So we're doxing this guy, and he is actually really good. Very little online. You know, we get his work environment, things like that, but we find his wife. So we find his wife's Facebook. Now, she's an open book. She's got every pool party, every place she's flying, all that stuff all over, and through her, we found the daughter. Now, the daughter has this, 15-year-old I hate daddy thing going on, and to get back at daddy, she's posting her boobs all over the internet. Now I have two issues. One is it's illegal, right? Because it's underage nudity. Second is, if I was a nation state, I would definitely use this because she was geotagging with her iPhone her pictures that she was taking in her bathroom when she was uploading them, so I knew exactly where they lived. So I would kidnap her. Now, I can't go, hey, Chris, look, we have this whole thing. I'll leave them feeling better for having met you, so we can't use that, delete. I couldn't. I had to tell him. Now, I didn't use it. I would never use that as part of the attack vector. So those did not become the spearfish. But we took all the links, we put them on a USB. I requested a private meeting with him. We gave him the USB with a text file on it, not with the images, because you can't transport those images legally. So I gave him a text file where the images are, told him what he should do, how he should handle it, and told him how I would have dealt with this if I was a nation state. If I was a nation state that wanted to attack him, I would have kidnapped his daughter. I would have used as maybe as exploit, as blackmail. I would have contacted her and said, I'm going to put these everywhere where your dad can see them unless you go into his computer and insert this USB key. I would have done one of these 10 things. And he was like, oh my gosh, right? Eyes open. So I can tell him what the potential attacks are without having to actually do them, right? But you have to really think through that when you're a pro, because it's not always about being cool, right? So the empathy part says, how would I want someone to handle this if it was my daughter? If somebody was looking at my life and they found something on my daughter, how would I want you to handle it? Well, it definitely wouldn't be embarrassing and humiliating me, right?
Would it be just a verbal report, or would you include a separate written report?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it was, would I include a separate written report? I don't put those links in a written report. Why? Because there's going to be a bunch of IT guys reading this, and now I just put every link to his daughter's nude pictures in there. I'm not going to do it, right? Again, I don't want to humiliate anyone. So I'm not doing that. So that goes to a separate report. Now, we always give them an option, and this is another good story. We had a case where another high-level, C-level person, we did the SIRA for them, and in looking at her family, we found that her daughter was not married, but dating a guy. They bought a house together, and he was a registered sex offender. She had 3 kids. So I'm like, oh man, what do I do, right? So I'm like, I need to talk to her. So I requested a meeting with the C-level, and I told her, and she was like, oh yes, we know. And I'm like, okay, don't want to inquire, and ended up he was a 19, military guy, went to Canada, they're partying. He sleeps with a girl who he thought was 18, she said it. She ended up being 17, dad got ticked, had him arrested. He's not a registered sex offender. He's not a pedophile. He's not a predator, right? He made a really dumb mistake with another consenting, almost adult. And he now is dinged on this, but they knew it. So she said, you can include that in the report, that's fine. So she was very appreciative that we handled it that way, but she said, you can include that in the report with no problem. So we always give them the option, but you see, that is the empathetic response, because I don't want, now, first of all, female in any C-level industry. Any of them here? Any females in C-level, higher up level in a company? No? How hard is it for females to get there? It's difficult, right? And now I'm going to be the guy that tells the whole company something horribly negative about this poor woman, that now they're going to all look at her? Not going to do it, right? So you got to also have that feeling about, what am I going to do to help this person when I find the bad things, so I'm not humiliating them, embarrassing them, or hurting their potential future career. And that, to me, is one of the biggest parts of being a professional social engineer. Being able to think like the bad guys while you remember you're the good guys. Right? And that's a really hard line sometimes, and it could also be psychologically difficult for you as the SE. And that example I told you before, where he's inviting me to his daughter's engagement party, I took like an hour break after that call because I felt really dirty. I really did. I'm like, pull out the bottle of whiskey, like, I'm so sorry. It just feels so bad, like you're on the phone with this guy and he's inviting you to his engagement party for his daughter. He thinks you're the second coming of Christ, and then you're like, and I'm in the background in his email, right? I'm like looking at an appointment he has in 30 minutes, and I'm going to hack this Skype call and listen in, and then we did. And I'm listening to this Skype meeting about a special project. And I'm like, oh, this is so bad, and we're recording it. It's just like terrible, but that's the job, right? And as long as I don't do it with the goal of how much can I hurt this guy, and doing it with how much can I help the company, then I feel that I'm doing my job properly. Now, report writing. I'll try my hardest to not spend too much time on this, but this is really important. So how many of you do this for a living? Like do some kind of pen testing or services to people for a living with IT? Okay. So you guys can be really good at your job, but if you can't correlate that and relay that to your clients, how good are your services? Yeah, they're not good, right? So, and then those of you who are hiring people doing these services, how much does it stink for you when you get a report that is useless? It's a 300-page Nessa scan, or it's a one-page report that says, we pawned you. It doesn't, like, neither of those are good, right? So report writing, to me, is the essential piece for the professional. How do I professionally relate what I just did to you on paper so you can read it and make it actionable? How do I professionally relate the attacks that I performed without using elite speak and without making it embarrassing, but then build education around that? And that report is the most essential piece of being a professional social engineer. So if there's one skill you want to learn, don't take a psychology class, take a report writing class. Boring as heck, I will tell you right now. The worst advice I can give, you're going to be sitting there going, I hate Chris Hadnagy. You're going to come to my website and punch the screen, but that's okay, because when you go to the job and you're like, oh yeah, here, I got this certificate in report writing, or I've written these reports, I'm actually one of the best report writers in my company, that's going to make you really attractive to someone like me. Really attractive. I have people that come all day and they OSINT the living snot out of me. I'll tell you an example. A guy that's getting interviewed right now, he came out of the blue because he found my corporate email in the hacking team breach. So hacking team, you remember they got breached. They sent someone to Black Hat to steal my class. So they talked about it in their email, and when their company got hacked, their email threads got dumped online, and I didn't care, I wasn't reading it, but somebody said, hey, do you know your email is in the breach? And I'm like, no, let me go check it out. And it was a whole conversation they had about sending some guy named Sergio to Black Hat to steal my course, and they were going to steal it and sell it to, yeah, it sounds even like really bad, doesn't it? Sergio, come to my class, and, going to steal your course and send it to the Russians. I don't know what accent that is, by the way. I don't know if that's where, so if I offended any culture, I'm really sorry. That terrible accent, I should just stick with pirate. Anyhow, he was coming to because pirate, you can't offend anyone. Actually, we saw a pirate on the way here, didn't we, Reese? We were driving by this van, it's like, I love pirate life, and the guy looked like a pirate. Scraggly hair, like eye patch, we were like, pass him in a van, like, arr, matey. Okay, anyhow, back to report writing. I digress. He came to me through that method by finding my email in a breach. then emailed me out of the blue and said, hey, I know this is your email because I found it in this breach unless you changed it, and I'm really interested in working for you. And I'm like, see, now you got my attention. Now you got my attention because you thought of a creative way to actually introduce yourself to me. Everything's great, and now we need to know, can you write reports? This is a big deal. Right? Because you could be creative, you could be awesome, you could be good at OSINT, you could be great at phishing, you could be great at all these things, but at the end of the day, if you can't write a report, I'm going to have to decide, does your salary requirements and needs make it so teaching you how to write reports is beneficial to me? Right? And if it is, now we can keep talking. If not, boy, that's a big investment, right? To teach someone how to write reports. It's hard. I remember the first report I ever wrote where I got educated, and it was painful. Because the way they did it is they kept sending it back to me with red lines until I got it right. And after the 12th time, I literally wanted to hurt everybody. I was punching kittens. I was like grabbing, I'm so mad. I just can't stand it. I'll punch a kitten. Like I couldn't take it. It was so, I didn't punch a kitten, by the way. Sorry, anyone who loves kittens. But it was hard. It was a horrible experience. But in the end of the day, it was the best thing that they ever did to me. Because I left that going, hey, I actually understand why that stunk the first 11 times. And it made me a better report writer. So, think about that. I won't go on that more because it's important to really ponder that. Now, I'm going to do a little mini rant. I will, okay? Because these are other things. Now, again, some of this is going to be definitely a little touchy for some people because I know there's lots in the industry that do this. But the 100%. Think about this, guys. How many people do you see on their websites claiming they're always 100%? How demoralizing is that? Imagine if you went to your doctor and he said, 100% of my patients die. Great, doc. I really want you to take care of me. Like any other industry, it doesn't make sense. 100% of my clients, their car breaks next week. It doesn't make sense. 100% of my clients are going to fail every test I give them. You see the messaging we're sending? Now, it may be true, but still the messaging shouldn't be that negative. So I want you to give me tens of thousands of your dollars. And what you're going to get in return is failure. Woohoo, right? Please keep paying me. I need to keep paying my car payment. Right? I need to take some lavish vacations. I need your money, but you're going to fail. It doesn't make sense, does it? So 100% is really a terrible statistic to say to a client that you're going to fail. So I don't use statistics in that. When on a meeting with them and I'm asked, like, hey, how many people do fail in phishing? I'll give them realistic numbers. But then I'll tell them also, we have a client we've been working with for 6 years, and this is a real story. When we started, we were at 81% success ratio. 81% of the people would give us their full name, their date of birth, their social security number. We are now at 7%. After 6 years. But in those 6 years, they have implemented everything we've told them to do. They've implemented security protocols. They've changed the way that we can contact their people. They've implemented things that make it almost impossible. There are some months that we're working with them where we are at 0%. I literally cannot get anything. And we are trying everything possible. There's even to the point where we've taken it to the not leaving them feeling better for having met you. Right, like where we actually had 2 women act like one was pregnant and she was about to give birth on the phone, and that was the only thing that worked. Because the guy on the phone couldn't deal with the pressure. She's like giving birth, and her assistant, which is another woman, is like, oh my God, we just need the bank account number before her so we can do payroll. Please give it to us. And he's like, I don't know what to do. We're like, just give it to us. And she's in the back going, ah! And then he's like, okay, here it is. And we're like, thanks, bye, click. And we're like, it was just so bad, it was so bad. But it worked, right? But they were like, please do this because we want to know how far. They asked us how far and then right after that call, they went and talked to the person, right? So that way they knew. That's the kind of results we like, but I don't want to tell anyone 100%. Man, that's just terrible. Also, the live tweeting. This is something I refuse to do on a pen test. So imagine this. Very rare do you see someone in this community live tweeting with a name. But you know that you've hired me. So you know that you've hired Social Engineer. And you know this is the date that I'm coming to your company to break in. And now you're checking my Twitter account, and I'm like, oh my God, these guys are so stupid. Look at this lock, ping, it's unlocked. Oh, look at how easy this office is. I just broke in. Look at this guy's pictures on his computer. And you're live tweeting these things. How humiliating is that for the person? Now, you didn't mention who, but they're looking at your Twitter account and going, oh man, that's me. Oh, that's so terrible. And you're not leaving them feeling better for having met you. So rule in my company is we don't live tweet We don't live tweet pen tests. Now, that's a personal thing. You decide if you want to do that or not. I'm telling you, this is a very personal level talk. I'm telling you that if you were coming to work for me, this is what I look for. People that don't do these things, because that also shows a pretty good empathetic response. I understand that you may not all know where I'm going next week, but if you look at my Twitter account next week and you see me tweeting some horrible things about a client, they may know that I'm saying things about them. And that could be pretty damaging to my relationship with them. So we don't do it. Okay, so other skills that won't hurt. Experience. Yeah, I know, that's a great one, isn't it? Oh man, it's a great motivational poster. Every corpse on Mount Everest was once a highly motivated person. Okay, has nothing to do with what I'm about to tell you. I don't expect any of you to die doing this, but I just thought it was fitting. Other skills that won't hurt. Experience. Now, how do you get experience? This is a really hard one, isn't it, guys and gals? How do you get experience in an industry where you can't really do this stuff for practice because it's illegal? So you can't, how do you get experience? Well, I say this and I understand that it's not always the easiest thing to do, but even starting with a pen test company that does 1 or 2 fish or a little bit of vishing, or you get to be on the team once when you're breaking into a place, is enough experience. Entering CTFs like the SECTF, very self-promoting here, but the SECTF, I actually have someone working for me. I hired her because of her involvement in the SECTF. She got in the booth, she was so amazing, I'm like, hired, literally hired her after the SECTF. Being involved in those things could help you get the experience you need. Education is not a bad thing. Now, I'm not promoting you have to go get like a 7-year degree, but like I said, report writing courses, taking courses in sales, influence, psychology courses, all these things are just going to help you understand how people think, what makes them do the things they do, and that can help you be a better social engineer. And for me, a big one is community involvement. So when I started this, I started with working, doing the 300-page Nessa scans. That's how I started. And then I took the offensive security pen testing with backtrack course back in the day. That's a lot of backs and blacks right there. I took that back in the day, and I got addicted. It became like a drug for me. Has anyone taken that course? Right? Yeah, so I'm buying lab time, and I'm like, I need more, I'm like, give me lab time, and I'm just like, more lab time, and I was like up all night hacking these things, and I ended up breaking into FC4, which at the time was a server that no one had broken into, and Maddie offered me a job because of it, and it was like a moment in my life that everything changed. And when I started with that, it was something where when I wrote the framework and my first book, and we did the podcast and newsletter, the community made us successful. So for me, paying that back is doing things like the DEF CON SE Village, the DerbyCon SE Village, trying to help people get into the industry. People always say, don't you fear you're making competitors for yourself? No. I mean, how many of us don't have enough work in this industry? Anyone here going on? You don't have enough work? Okay, well, we should talk about what you're doing, because I'm turning jobs away. I mean, really should. Like, there's so much work in this industry, and for all of you that raised your hand that say you're doing this, I've never competed against you, right? I've never competed against you. I've never competed against you, and probably vice versa. Why? It's because we're not touching. Because there's too many clients, there's too much need. I heard that 13% of American companies are actively doing phishing training right now. 13%. And I went from 4 to 11 people in like a year. So if 13%, I mean, what's next? So I think there's lots of room for growth here. If you do all this, what's the result? Well, I got to do some pretty cool things. I mentioned a few of the jobs, but one of the things I'm most proud of is something that Patrick allowed me to talk about a little in the beginning, and that's the ILF. In doing all this work over the years, I had a chance to realize that I'm not just a human hacker. We had a couple cases, one in particular where we were doing SE work, Sierra work for a big client, and I won't go through the whole story. It's in the DEF CON talk if you want to watch it, because we're running out of time. But through a series of very small events, we found that this guy was flying to the Philippines and he was raping children and selling the videos. And I was sitting in a deli in DC with the director of this company when he was being arrested. And that was due to our work. And that was the starting of the ILF. Because I said, whoa, like something just happened, right? Like I'm just a greasy little hacker with my hoodie on, sitting in the basement with one light hacking things at nighttime. But this guy just got arrested because of something we did, and now maybe some children are safe. And that felt really good. And I said, well, so we can actually do something in this industry that uses our skill sets that is more than just breaking and entering and picking locks and stuff like that. And that started the ILF. And now I have hundreds of people asking to be a part of it. We have 12 active researchers working on it now, marketing people, the board of directors, 180K in donations, 180K and 500 right now. Thank you to Patrick and CRI, or Layer 8, sorry. But what an amazing thing to be able to do, and you can find something like that with your skills, something paying back to the community or to the world because you're able to have these skills and apply them in a way with empathy that makes people feeling better for having met you. So I think we have some time for questions. I think we have at least, so we have 10 minutes. Awesome.
So I have a devil's advocate question.
Yes.
You're very good at what you do.
Thank you.
And you take on an engagement, and you, going back to the empathy slide, you have that mindset. You go in and you say, there's a line that I draw, I will not cross.
Yep.
The adversarial guy will never have that line.
Correct.
They will never stop. So they will get what they want. But because you have that empathy in your engagement, that's stopping you from crossing that line, are you really emulating the real thing?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Is the customer really getting what they pay?
It's a great question. So so to clarify something you said, the question was by not stepping over the boundaries of empathy, for those of you who couldn't hear over here, do we really test our clients, or are we being unfair with them? That was the question. So the reality of the matter is that when we go through OSINT, let's say, we don't stop from looking for vectors like the 15-year-old with her nude pictures. We just don't use them. Right, we just don't use them. So it doesn't stop me from thinking like the bad guy. So I'll still go out there and think like, hey, this guy could attack him these 3 ways, and we tell them that. But I also have to find a balance for me. I have to be able to crawl on the couch at night with my daughter and feel good about myself. I have to be able to, wake up in the morning and not feel like I ticked off my family, myself, or God, or anything like that. I have to be able to feel good about my job. And to do that, I have to find the balance because I'm not the bad guy. So is there always a little bit left in the, yeah, I think that's fair to say that there is a limit that we won't cross, and that may not always test. But with that said, that doesn't mean we never do. The example of that financial institution that asked us after 6 years, they said, will you please lose the leaving them feeling better and try these vectors? And we're like, sure, because you've proven this is not stage 1 now, right? With 6 years, they've been pounding us and we've been pounding them. And now we go, okay, you know what? We'll try this on a subset of calls for a couple hundred people, and we'll pull out all the stops. And we will be super negative, fear-inducing, as long as the minute the engagement's over, they all get trained and they get taught that this was good and no one's getting fired. They agreed to it and we did it, right? So we will take it to that level, but stage 1, man, that's just hard, Yeah, Peter.
Do you have your pre-checks and your fishes pre-approved by your customers?
That's a good question. So there's multiple answers to that. Yes and no. Yes, if it is educational-based phishing. So if I'm doing phishing for a client, like 50,000 people, we have one client, we fish all 50,000 of their employees every month, and we do it in a layered approach. All of those fish get approved because it's going to the whole organization, and they have to go through HR, legal, make sure. We did this once where we used to not do that, and we actually sent out a healthcare fish. HR was rolling out a new healthcare. It caused massive problems in the organization. No one was signing up for anything because they all thought it was the fish. Yeah, it was really bad. It was really bad. So we have to organize with them when we're doing educational-based fish. When we're doing pen testing, we do not normally, unless we're requested, we do not normally get approval for our fish because the pen test should be as black box as possible. It should not allow you to know what's happening, or anyone in the company to know what's happening. Yeah. Yes, sir.
At a certain point, your activity is going to rise to the level of getting noticed by other groups. So talk to me about your threats and countermeasures.
Yeah.
About what you're concerned with, especially operating outside of the U.S.
Can you tell me what area are you mostly asking about? Is it physical, phishing, vishing, pen testing, education?
So let's hypothesize that you've done your work and your due diligence on a particular target, and that target is now in the hands of a government organization because of the work that you've done. However, their backing is worth a lot more money than your company is today. So they've decided to come see you. So talk to me about threats and countermeasures, about that kind of activity Because sooner or later, these people that are in here are going to step on that.
Yeah.
If they decide.
Sure. Are you talking more about ILF then? About the ILF than you are my company? Because I can answer that quickly. The company part.
Let's use ILF.
Okay.
Because that really is a good area.
Yeah. Because on the company side, we're never in that circumstance because you hire us to do the work for you. So you already know. And it is rare for us to find something illegal. In the case we do, it's usually stealing of money, funds, company documents, or child pornography. And then those go right to the federal government. So that situation in a corporate endeavor has never occurred. From the ILF piece, we are not a vigilante group. We are working with law enforcement. So when the guy or gal who is producing child pornography needs to get arrested, I'm not there. I'm not even known. When they kick the door in, they're not like, we're here because of ILF, right? They go, we hand this stuff over to the federal government, the FBI or DHS. They have to reproduce every step, so we can't use any illegal hacking methods. There could be no breaking and entering. It has to be all elicitation and OSINT. They have to be able to reproduce every step. Then they go to a federal judge, they get a warrant, they go arrest the guy. When he's arrested, we're not even involved. I may be told on the side, hey, that case led to an arrest, but we are not involved in that piece. So it would be really hard for me to believe that anyone could figure out that we did it.
So then put the spin on it then that the contractual signing happened in a facility where the company that hired you to do this actually had an infiltrator from that group in the company. So that will happen.
Yeah. So you mean an insider threat?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm probably running out of time.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't, but I think we're good, right? We're good?
Last
Yeah.
question is, when they invite you to the airstrip on the small island in the Florida Keys to come talk to them about the next contract, are you going to go meet them?
Sure. Florida Keys sounds great. But I'll send one of the people I don't really need much. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Hey, Mike, I need you to go to the Keys. No, just kidding. It's my brother. I love you, man. No. Yeah. No, it's so I understand exactly what you're asking, and the couple times that we have found insider threats, or that we have found people, like I told you, producing illegal material or stealing, mainly they were not linked to a crime organization, and then the way it was handled wasn't us. Like we went in, and this one guy, he was downloading company records in addition to gigs worth of pornography on the company network every night. He was a night worker, and we saw the traffic, and we were analyzing the traffic, and we're like, what is going on? And then when we figured out what it was, we reported it to the security department in the company right away. Like pen test ends when you see something like that, and it's like, hey, you have a really bad actor here doing some really bad things. Now they jump in. Maybe they can figure out it's us, but a lot of times the security takes over, they call the police, and it's done. So there hasn't been a case where I've been in an organization where I'm finding that they're also pilfering thousands or millions of dollars into drug lords in Colombia or something. So I haven't found that yet. So I can't answer the question honestly what I would do. If that happens, I probably will go sell hot dogs and to do something else that doesn't get me killed. That would probably be my answer if that ever were to occur. But the key sounds nice.
Do you think that's a real threat, like a retribution, for instance?
Yes.
And it happens frequently?
It happens enough.
So I'm surprised you haven't run into it then. If it happens,
I haven't.
It depends on your client base. And it depends on what they're willing to pay and what you're willing to do. So what I'm just saying is there are certain things that you're going to run into. I'm just curious about if he has and what he's...
It's a cautionary tale about make sure you pick good customers. I mean,
Cautionary tale is not to go to the island in the Florida Keys and get on a plane and go to Mexico. But,
I mean, I've never been, so I think it's because of the way that we present our work. The clients that we get are generally not the ones that I have to worry about that. Right now, when I go overseas, I am also very picky about where I go. Right? Again, it's not a prejudice thing about which country, but what government agency or what organization is asking me to do the work. I have rejected work because they wanted me to come do my 5-day training, and the regime that runs that area of the world has been known to use torture, and that's something that I don't want to have said, oh, I went and trained those folks. Right? So I have rejected that work in the past because of looking at it and saying, not my cup of tea. It's not my thing. Like, I used to go do a class for SOCOM, Special Operations Command, and they were like, hey, can you do that? And I'm like, nope, you can take my 5-day public class, and that's what I teach, right? That's what I teach this. I teach these things, and that's it. I don't teach interrogation and torture tactics. I don't teach how to break people through manipulation. I teach influence. I teach rapport. So bam, you can take this, and they did for 3 years straight. They took it, right? But I don't have to. I don't employ those.
No number two
Yeah,
power.
yeah, no. Yes, sir.
In the beginning, you mentioned people were doing social engineering and you ever have a fear still. One thing is, like, I don't do it anymore, but I used to. You didn't mention like the fear of having it done to yourself, because with the ease that I've seen, certain things work. I'm like a salesperson's worst nightmare, because pretty much every phone call, email I get, I kind of become paranoid, and it's like, how am I gonna?
Yeah.
What kind of angle is this person working?
Yeah.
Does that ever go away?
No. So it actually doesn't. There's two things that people usually ask when I give talks on things like nonverbals, and this is like, can you shut it off? So reading nonverbals, you can't shut it off. Once you have the knowledge, it's there. It's just part of your makeup. And once you're in this industry, everyone's a bad person. And now that I'm an ILF, everyone's a pedophile, right? So like, if someone looks at my daughter, like if someone looks at my daughter, I'm like, oh, okay, let's go, right? It's like, you just looked at my daughter, right? Oh, are these illegal in Rhode Island? Sorry, maybe we should. But it's like, I'm not. It's the part of the. I'm sorry, people watching this. So terrible. Yeah. And the last time Chris was invited to SERI. It's one of the negatives of being in the industry, but I think this is where empathy helps. So when empathy helps, I'm able to balance that. But I am you can ask my wife if you want, I'm very paranoid about everything to an extreme degree. I think that keeps us secure, but I think you have to balance your paranoia with some compassion at times too. Yeah. You had your hand up. Yes, ma'am.
So you mentioned when ILF does a report, the steps have to be followed by the FBI and DHS. How do you recreate social engineering?
Yeah.
And kind of what's the extent of what they do when that gets turned over?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Do I have time? Sure. Okay. So maybe the best way to do it is to give you a real-life example without using too much detail. There's a forum on the dark web that specializes in young boys, and there was a person on the forum that was asking to actually stop looking at pictures and to start trading real children. Other people started to interact with him, not us, saying, hey, where do you live, where we could talk, this and that. Not very smart of him, he started to give details about what part of the world he was in. So we were able to take his username and his area of the world and then start to commit OSINT on that username and see if anything was similar in that area of the world, right? So over in the Spain, Portugal area. We happened to find that with just adding a couple digits to his username, we were able to find people that were in that area. So now we did a list of all their hobbies. We found his YouTube page, his Facebook page, list of hobbies. Of course, on the public web, nothing about little boys, right? So now we start looking at those hobbies and we come back to that forum and we start seeing, does he talk about anything? And he did. He leaked that he was into model airplanes at one point, and he will be at a model airplane show here. Maybe he can meet up with this other guy and they can talk. So we're like, okay, we're pretty sure it's this guy. So we are basically writing everything I just said down, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 10, step 100, exactly what happened and how it occurred. Right? And then that goes to the federal government and they're able to go, URL, yes, we see this guy, they connected it here, they went to Google, they did this, they used Maltego, they did that, and they get to see the path of everything that we've done. It's very, very time consuming, which is why no one has done this yet, because most of the time people focus on, let's create technology to help law enforcement. This is so time consuming because you take one researcher who may spend 100 hours, that case took me 57 hours to do, and at the end of it, you have a text file that's maybe like 25 lines long, and you're like, that's it, that's all I got, but that guy is a bad actor, so it's now useful to them. That's not always as clearly defined. Sometimes there's some things that don't get as clearly defined, or if we have communications with them, in another case, there's communications through email, and the header and the whole email thread is then pasted in so that they can see every communication that has occurred. They can't duplicate that, but now they have chain of evidence. Right, so all that stuff is done properly. Yeah, a good question though. Yes, sir.
So sometimes when you might run into, you find a pedophile online and you find clues to something that happens soon,
That's time sensitive.
Yeah.
So how, like, we have to transfer the file over early to the FBI? Or?
That's painful, I tell you, because the FBI, and I'm saying this and it sounds so negative, but I'm really trying to, it's just the facts, they move slow, too slow. I have recently made contact with some people in the Canadian the police department that move fast and they got connections all over the world. So trying to see how we work that, because I'm not a Canadian citizen. So we're trying to figure out ways to like SE the system and circumvent those things so we can get these active cases done faster. So many countries, like we have an active case in Amsterdam, but the Dutch police can't work with me, because I'm a private citizen and they can't take information. It's against their laws to take information from a private citizen. I'm like, I have people actively selling young women. Like, we want to give this to you, please. Like, just maybe it just slips in your email box and you're like, oops, what's this? Let me go arrest this guy. But like, you know, and they're like, we can't do it. We can't do it. So it's the burden of law enforcement, because they have to be able to go, and I understand why. They have to go to court, and they don't want this guy walking because of some technicality. Because some jamoke like me forgot that on line 15 I'm supposed to do this one thing, and I didn't do it right, and now this guy's like, oh, that's wrong, I'm walking. And now he's back out on the street, and he's empowered now, because he knows all the mistakes that were made. I don't want to, you know, so I understand why, but at the same time it's so frustrating because it moves so slow. But if anyone's got solutions for that, I am all ears. I would love to talk to you about that. Is it over?
Can you take more outside?
I will take more outside. Can we do more outside? Okay, thank you guys and gals. Thank you.
So we got lunch downstairs right now, and we got like birds of a feather kind of discussions. If you want to talk about phishing, pretexting, physical